Welcome to another episode of Chasing Squirrels. Today's episode is brought to you by goldensquirrel.io, where job matches are created by companies applying to you. Companies apply to you while ensuring their salary and benefits information matches your requirements before they interview you. Create a free profile today at goldensquirrel.io to get access to members-only data, as well as to unlock the opportunity for companies to start applying to you. On today's episode, our guest is Daniel Marashlian. He's the CTO and co-founder at Drata. If you want to join a team that has clearly done this several times, and you'll hear some of the awesome war stories from Startup Land on today's episode, then you'll definitely want to check out this opportunity. They are currently hiring front-end and back-end engineers, and their tech stack is full-stack JavaScript, so React on the front end and Node on the back end. If you've ever stayed up till 3 a.m, ensuring that your website or project you're working on is pixel perfect, then this is definitely the opportunity for you, and you will want to work for Daniel. So I think you'll see what I mean. With that, let's go ahead and get the conversation started. Welcome to another episode of Chasing Squirrels. And on today's episode, we have Daniel Marashlian, and he is the CTO and co-founder at Drata. So welcome to the show today, Daniel.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, so you want to give us a kind of high-level overview of what it is that Drata does? We'll definitely dive into more details in a bit. Just kind of want the 30,000-foot level view.
Yeah, the elevator pitch is we help companies automate their SOC 2 readiness. It's a pain in the ass, especially as us on the engineering front, to manage those security programs. And we automate that whole process, making your lives a lot easier.
Awesome. So we'll definitely come back to Drata, but one of the things that I noticed in looking at kind of your work history is that you've been both a CTO, director of engineering, whatever you want to, categorize that as, for a while. And it feels like you've had pretty good success of having your company acquired multiple times. Do you kind of want to take us through that timeline and some things you learned along the way?
Yeah, for sure. I've been a serial entrepreneur almost my whole career. I started, I've a classically trained as an engineer, computer science degree. And then when actually one of my first jobs was at a university or a community college, and we were one of the first online learning management systems. And so with that kind of came managing like 60,000 students and all this data, and it was my first kind of job in there, and so that was fun. But as I worked in this industry and had a boss and worked in like a bureaucratic situation, I just knew it wasn't for me, and at least I got great experience, and I got my master's in leadership during that time, and I said, okay, I'm setting sail to San Diego and starting some companies here. So since then, that was in when was that? Probably late 2007, and started one of my first companies called Pelotonics. It was a direct competitor to Basecamp at the time. I forget their exact timeline. I think they started around 2005 or something like that. But it was a direct competitor to them, and we saw it was actually an amazing tool. It still is, but we thought we could do it better. And we built a great product. And at the time, I think we were a little too early in the space. Now things like Asana and Trello and all these billion-dollar companies in the online project management space, and we were doing all of that like well before any of those things were companies. And so that one was great lessons learned as my first tech company started. And
what were some of those lessons? And it sounds like you started it with a group of people. So how did you kind of go from, people always wonder, how do you go from a job to like, okay, now we're starting something?
Yeah, for sure. I just, knew what I do now is what I wanted to do. So it was before maybe the Instagram phase. I feel like Instagram kicked off a lot of things where people saw this small app sell for $1 billion. And so it was before that world. But it was just more around, I knew I wanted to like build my own stuff and create that. And I guess to back up just a little bit was when I moved to San Diego, I had a good job, pay the rent, whatever. And so I actually worked at an agency here in San Diego, and it was really cool. We built like all these websites for the NFL. and all these NCAA websites and video games. And that was really empowering where we built like, I think even NCAA.com, the CBS marketing property. And so it was like every sport, every school. And like, I remember watching March Madness that year in 2008. And it was like, holy cow, the site I built is on like national, probably international television, like CBS threw so much money at that. And so that was really cool. Like something I built went out to the millions. And that was my aha moment of that was what I wanted to do, was build consumer software, whether it was B2B stuff or for B2C, but it was like to impact users and to like be the creator there and the artist there. And that was always fun. So that's really where it kicked it off.
What specifically, technically speaking, were you working on in that project? Were you doing some of the front end or back end, or were you kind of like both?
On the like sports properties ones, I was more back end, me. So it was like handling all the data of everything. But then, you know, once I moved into entrepreneurship and we started a company with my co-founder then, Troy Malone, he, you know, had this idea where he was a Basecamp customer, and he was like, I don't know, the Jason and those guys over there, I think they're better now, but back in the day, they were like notorious for not listening to their customers. And so he was a big customer of Basecamp, and was like, they weren't listening to him as like a big user. And he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go do this myself. And so I think he like started turning the wheels, and then he met me, and then we went after it. And you know, we raised a little angel seed round and hired. It was primarily, I was the primary engineer, and CTO was this really small company. There was like 2 full-time employees, and then you know, we had some contractors. Then we actually hired a team in India that we were contracting with at first, and then like kind of realized like they were, you know, doing good and whatnot under my leadership. And we realized like with the money we raised, we're like, you know what, I think we could like give this team a better life. Like we heard personally after we started working with them, like, you know, just their actual wages, like their working environment, where they're like working in a really closed quarter room at like, it's like 100+ degrees inside with no AC. And we're like, this sucks. Like I bet we could pay them directly. It would save us money in the long run. And they would like, you know, be workhorses for us, like, cause we're going to give them a better life. And so we actually flew to India and set up an office with them. It was crazy. It was awesome. So yeah, that was cool. And we helped, and you know, we got them an office and internet. And you could imagine sometimes in some parts in India, it's like chaos where there's like generators outside, and you're like like power's down and getting internet to the building. It was a fun time. But yeah.
Have you done that again? Have you done that again since?
I have not. Yeah. Those are the things that you do as a first-time entrepreneur.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, you gotta do. But it was good, and we were able to, you know, get a full team at a cheap price because we didn't have too much funds that we raised, and we were able to build out what we did. We were probably like, for some of the competitors back then, that all of them had VC. I mean, Basecamp never did, outside of an investment from Bezos, but you know, all of them were doing like well, and we were doing well too. We were growing, but we were that like 3rd or 4th tier kind of company. And we were just kind of held back from the investment and hiring and timelines, and, you know, trying to go fast and build more and be competitive. And it just kind of, it was interesting. The biggest thing I learned there was my investors, while they were great and obviously awesome that they believed in us, they kind of like, from an angel perspective, I think you want to align yourself like to understand the angels that are going to invest in you, and make sure that they understand their position. And that it's like they're gonna get diluted, they're gonna not be on the board anymore as you go to raise an A round or something like that in the future. And my investors at the time just kind of, I don't think, had that vision, and didn't want to get diluted, and didn't want to give up their power in the position in the company. And we were like, me and the other founder were like, we need to raise more money, like we can't work for free anymore, our competitors are doing XYZ. And so it just kind of sadly, like that was, you know, the demise of that business, and we ran out of money, and we weren't able to grow as fast. And yeah, one cool thing that led to that is we were actually Evernote's first API integration with that team. And actually we were one of the first integrations on Google Drive, or back then Google Docs, working with that team back then. And so that was really fun in terms of working with these bigger companies, but doing cool things for business, and integrating their tools and making great workflows, which kind of we'll circle back here in a sec to Drata of how that helped me think about that. But so after that kind of business, we passed it on, and I mean, it kind of ran itself and it made money, and we kind of just sold it in a way back to one of the investors, and they continued to run it. I don't think it's around
in
anymore.
that particular business, what did you guys use, or what did you learn in terms of the infrastructure of the app itself? Were you using like AWS back then,
Yeah,
or because
no,
I
I
know it
don't
was a
even
lot more beginner
I,
level then,
I
right?
honestly forget AWS's timeline of those days, but I don't think AWS was a thing. We had
Right.
a colo, servers in a rack in San Diego somewhere. I honestly forget.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, so it was all .NET. Like we were using C# on the back and the ASP.NET stuff on the front, and that stuff was just kind of just coming out and maturing, and with like Ajax, I forget how they did it. It was like the ASP.NET Ajax. That stuff was ages ago, but
Yeah. I was just
so
curious. It's always fun to
yeah.
hear like the throwback
uh,
technologies.
I think the main thing for me, I don't know why this always comes to my mind in this business, and I always tell this to my earlier engineers that I work with, younger engineers, is like, I remember one night I was up till 3 a.m. trying to figure out how to move a button 1 pixel up, like vertically center it, because it wasn't centered, and it just drove me crazy. So I was like, I got to figure this out, and and it was like, it wasn't so much the 1 pixel that took me, to figure out. It was the like tenacity to like, why isn't this centering, and understanding like CSS and like the block positioning, or now you have like flex, and so maybe now it's not that big of a deal anymore. But it was all that stuff back then, and so it was it's like definitely true. It's like that 10,000 hours to master something. And it takes those 3 a.m. nights moving something 1 pixel to like bust through that wall. And so I
Oh,
think that was
definitely.
always a fun lesson I learned from that company. And as we shut that down, and as it's like you're a young entrepreneur and broke and whatever, you gotta figure out a job. And so I got connected through Twitter. I was always like big in the San Diego community as we were building that, and a lot of events that were kind of kicking up in those like 2007, 8, 9 days in San Diego, after the kind of .com crash was like kind of recovering in San Diego, and like web tools were getting more popular. And through my contacts there on Twitter, I was like, hey, I'm looking for a job and my skills. And one of my friends here in town, Rob, he kind of introed me to these guys, Sean Callahan and Rodney Rumford, and they started this a really cool idea. It was my friend Sean's idea. It was his thesis of his master's program over in London. He was traveling in London and getting his master's, and he wanted to share all of his like photos and experiences back home. But like, I think Facebook was getting much more popular back then, and but he was like, I wanted to share it because not all my family are on Facebook. Some are on Twitter, some are on this, some are on that. So he wanted to like upload a photo once and deliver it out everywhere. And so that was kind of the birth of Tweet Photo. It was that you could like build this API on this popular social network, Twitter, at the time. That was like not as big as it is now. And we
Right.
were and he launched the site where he empowered API developers to use our API to like embed photos into their applications. Back then, Twitter really didn't own anything outside of the API in their website. All the development and ecosystem is around the third-party developers. So we went and partnered with all developers, and it started working. And we landed a partnership with the biggest app user of Twitter. They accounted for like, I think, over 50% of all tweets. It was called Uber. Man, they changed the name so many times. What was it called? Uber
Uber
Twitter?
Facts or something?
Yeah, I think it was Uber Twitter. And so we partnered with them. And I think, this was right before I joined Sean up. It went from like 0 to 5 million users, let's just say overnight, right? Like it was not overnight, but it was really close. And like, I think he was probably advised from someone to get like a colo and servers. And it was like, I think literally the servers were at 100, like pegged at 100% CPU for like a month. And I was like, your servers are literally melting. Like that's a saying, but I think they literally were melting, and it just couldn't keep up, and they couldn't figure it out. And then, I was looking for something, and my friend Rob knew them and introed me. And I came in and assessed it and said, look, like I could rewrite this the entire application let's go. And that was kind of the story of Tweet Photo, is that, and I just, I don't think I slept for 2 weeks, and then we rewrote the whole app in 2 weeks, launched it, and it was, it went from 100% CPU to like 8. And I think at the time, we were on Rackspace. Yeah, we moved to Rackspace because we needed better servers and whatnot. And again, like AWS was like just starting; it really wasn't a popular thing in 2009-ish. And so we went to Rackspace, we had our own servers. It was like, I mean, there was a lot of traffic too. So loving, like being close to the metal, and yeah, it was awesome. And like we grew, I don't know anymore, because nowadays you can launch an app on Twitter, or sorry, you can launch an app on the App Store, and with proper marketing, because of Apple's distribution now on the iPhone and stuff, I mean, you can get 10 million users in a day. Like I remember like Pokemon Go and the Mario games that were just launched the past couple of years, like holy cow, those got like millions of users in one day. But I think at that time, obviously this isn't a fact, but I feel like it was probably one of the fastest growing companies of all time. We hit 18, it was 17 or 18 million users in 11 months.
Wow.
So from an idea to 11 months later, we had 17 million users.
That's crazy. I mean, all the numbers, to your point, are so much bigger. Like when Instagram sold for $1 billion, everybody thought Facebook was so dumb. Yeah. And like, oh, that was just too big of a number to deal with. Now nobody really cares. They're just like,
so we were building Tweet Photo and providing all the features that Instagram had before they were even a company. And it was crazy. I mean, we grew with Twitter as Twitter grew to a top 10 site in the world. I think they're a little lower now, but we grew to a top 100 site in the world. So we were doing about 100 million API calls a day. There was only 4 engineers on the team. Like we were very proud of the like ratio of servers and engineers to the code and the usage. And I mean, we were powering media on Twitter. It was crazy. And now
was that with like the little message underneath that was like brought to you by Tweet Photo kind of a deal?
Yeah. Okay. So Twitter on their actual app on their website still didn't support media. It was just text. But then we started working with all the third-party app developers on the mobile phones, which again, iPhone was like kind of just coming out and it wasn't really super popular. Blackberries were still the king. And so we were working with the developers and we embedded media into their apps. So that's why people were excited to use those apps, not like twitter.com, because you actually saw the photo, you can interact with it, comment it, like it, rate it, whatever, all the same interactions you would do on a Facebook or Twitter now. We're the ones that kind of kicked that off on that platform. And it was a fun ride. It was crazy. And as we grew to, crazy numbers and like 45 million users at the end of the day, I forget the exact day, but it was sometime in late 2010 that they told all their partners, essentially they sent this big email and they were just like, we're going to fill the holes. Like essentially they said, you're done. Like we're going to shut all you down and we're going to own everything. And it was announced with the acquisition of one of these apps in the ecosystem, Tweety, and which then now is, I mean, I'm sure it's been rewritten 10 times, but that now is the iPhone app for Twitter, because they didn't own any of the properties then. So they bought that. They kind of told all of us, like the video makers, the photo makers, the interaction tools, the analytics tools around the ecosystem, like, we're going to do it all, guys. This is before they were public. And so we kind of knew where we stood, right? Like, we're like, okay, so I mean, we had close relations. A funny story with that, and in more entrepreneurial little tidbits as I go on these companies, is we actually, I think Jack and those guys, especially back then, were like kind of notorious for not caring about like legal stuff and trademarks and patents and whatever. And my co-founder, Sean, he was always like a student of that stuff. So he trademarked like all that stuff, like Tweet Photo and Tweet and all this stuff. And so we actually were blocking Twitter from like trademarking Tweet and all that stuff. And eventually, and they didn't like us for that. And we had a really weird relationship with Ev and Jack and those guys. And I mean, now they're all billionaires, so it's insane. But yeah, they weren't really feeling us, because I think once the lawyers and the talks of going public got involved, like we were blocking them from a lot of that stuff and their IP. And it was crazy. Like honestly, one of our biz dev guys, like we're trying to like kind of be in bed with them, and as we wanted to grow, we kind of wanted to be acquired by them, and it just didn't work out. But anyway, we actually ended up giving them the trademark for free. And I was kind of against it. I was like, I think that trademark's worth more than our business, but I don't know. We were trying to play nice, and some of their original Twitter like paid models where you were gonna like pay to get like premier content from Wall Street Journal and stuff like that. It just never panned out for them in that model, and then they moved to the advertising model. But yeah, so it was funny. It was like, we gave up this trademark that was probably worth more than the business we sold for 10 million bucks. So, but we knew like where we stood even with all these users. So we were going to either raise a B round and pivot all the company or sell it. And so we ended up connecting through our investors and a meeting to a company in Seattle called Lockers. Kathy Savitt was the founder there. She was a marketing executive. She was on, she used to be an executive at Amazon and all that stuff. And John Doerr, like notorious VC, he was actually the only privately held company he was on the board of was Kathy's company, Lockers, because he loved Kathy when she was an executive at Amazon. So when she went to start out Lockers, he was a board member there, an investor. And so to us, it was like awesome. It was like, oh my God, look at this board, look at this founder, look at the trajectory of this company, and we could inject all the users and photos. And that's what we did. And we sold to Lockers. And while it worked for a hot second, there's a whole nother probably hour-long session we could do on that company. But sadly, short story, Lockers didn't really work out. And so, it was back to the drawing board. And me and those guys from sorry, this is maybe going a little long, but I'll keep going. So I'll wrap it up fast. So then me and the guys from the photo company started a survey company, kind of doing what Twitter did to authors by constraining them to 140 characters. Now it's 280. But we did that to survey creators. We said, look, we're going to put like walls on your creation process so that the end user could have this predictable experience and get through a survey and make it easy on their mobile phone and all that stuff. I mean, you have to have a PhD to write a really non-biased survey. So we tried to put software and algorithms in front of it to make it, and it worked. Like we actually were getting like 85% completion rates on surveys, where I think like average is like 2 to 4% on Google consumer surveys. And so it was totally working. And I guess the sum of that story of that business, we actually did sell that company to a competitor for the IP rights and the software. But the failure, I think, of that business was none of us were sales guys. I think that was like a big lesson, is that on like engineering and product, we had marketing, we had biz dev and product, and we could all evangelize every day, but like hitting the phones, like B2B sales, like none of us were those people. So I would say that was the biggest lesson I learned in that business, was if you're going to make a B2B app, make sure that like someone on the founding team is like a hardcore, amazing salesperson.
I mean, that's definitely a good transition to Portfolium, right?
Yeah. And that's what happened with Portfolium. As I was in an incubator in Evo Nexus in San Diego, which is a great incubator here in San Diego. And we were there, in an incubator space, you make friends with everyone, and you play ping pong, and you kind of help each other out here, there. And I met my now co-founder, Adam, there, and he started a company, Portfolium, a few months prior to me meeting him. And it was, think like LinkedIn for college students. And so he got into the incubator. I was there with the survey company. And so after I sold that, I kind of was already advising Adam a bit on technology. He's a brilliant guy. He's a former rocket scientist, literally, like worked for NASA, but he taught himself to code. And as you can imagine, like teaching yourself to code on YouTube while he got the product out. And I was really proud of him. I still have the code and I still make fun of him because it was so ugly. It was so good. But anyway, I was advising him how to like set up servers on the cloud and scale it. And then eventually he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, to come on board as a co-founder and CTO in the early days. And the rest was history with that company. It was, Adam and our other sales leader, Troy, just were relentless at the process and the efficiency. I think the average like sales cycle in ed tech, it was an educational technology company, is like 18 months. Ours was 90 days. So it was awesome to build software that reached millions of users. We, at the end of the company, before we sold, we had about 350 contracts with, universities, primarily in America, but some worldwide. It equated to roughly around, it was 5 million students or so. There's a couple million alumni in there, and helping them showcase their work on the ePortfolio. And then we built a lot of software out for the universities to help manage their assessment processes. And what that kind of means, that's a little insider baseball word in education, it kind of is a process to how does a university quantify their curriculum up to the accrediting bodies? And so we built software for them, where before they would get into like a big room and like with literally piles of paper this tall of the past 10 years of like essays written from English majors or whatever. And they would have to like reassess them on some like rubric. And it, obviously you would imagine no one wants to do that. So we wrote software to like automate all that and build processes around that. And it was really powerful and really cool. And we kind of started this movement of student success around the nation. Like if you go to educational conferences now, like that's the theme of them now, student success. And that was the drumbeat we were beating for 7 years. And it kind of worked. It was pretty awesome. And so we eventually sold and partnered with Instructure, the makers of Canvas, the world's leading learning management system. And that was in early 2019. And then we started, so that was an amazing outcome for all the founders and team and whatnot. And then we integrated the software into Canvas at large, into their sales cycles, into the business. And that was a crazy story as they kind of got acquired. They were a publicly traded company, but they got acquired by a private equity firm, changed some of the leadership up, like which accelerated our shares. And they kind of, I don't know, they offshored like a lot of the engineering to their Budapest office, and it just like wasn't working out. So, a lot of us left. And that's kind of where we started with Drata. And where it happened, it's a long story to hear, was as we were selling to universities, it was maybe 50% of the time or more, like the CIO of the university or someone like that would come in and say, let me see your SOC 2 report. And every time our sales leader, Troy, would come up to me, it's like, hey, are we SOC 2 certified? And I'm like, no, it's like a big pain in the ass. It's like a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources. We're doing everything right. Yet it was funny enough, we were making a company for students to prove their knowledge and their worth to job makers, for their universities, whatever. We couldn't prove our own security posture. And so this was this pain we felt. And it eventually, it stopped a couple deals. It slowed down almost all of them. And it was a contention piece. And the more we went in the business and went upstream into bigger universities, the more it was an issue. And so I really started looking at it, and I figured out, I was like, okay, I get it. I understand what we need to do. I don't know all the ins and outs. I'm not an auditor or an expert here. So we're going to have to hire a consultant. We're going to have to pull half the team off the roadmap. It's going to take like 3 to 6 months. And then we're also going to have to pay for the audit. Like, it was going to be a big endeavor for a young company, startup that's investing all its money back into growth. Right. And so we ended up not doing it. We sold the business coincidentally around the same time I was researching it. So it was like a moot point there. But in Instructure, I saw how they did. I mean, they're like 40 million students, like literally the world's leading e-management system. And so like I saw how their security team managed the program of their 1,200 employees and software and all that stuff. And I couldn't believe they were, it was great that they're SOC certified and all that fun stuff. And they're a great technology company, but it was like they were managing that security program by hand. It was like Jira tickets and spreadsheets, and there's a compliance manager and there's a CISO. And it's just like, holy guys, what are you doing? You're like supposed to be this sophisticated technology company that's like worth billions of dollars. And it's like done by hand, like I would do at a startup. And it was like, okay, there's a problem here. And that was kind of what kicked the idea after we left to like, as we were thinking of new ideas and wanted to work with each other again, me and Adam. And it was like, it kept coming back to that. It was like, what if we could automate, like, I don't know, you might not be able to automate all of it, but 80%, 90% of this process, and give those security teams in hours back to fix real security issues to protect their users and data. And that's kind of how it got started. And so from interviews to from the smallest companies of 1-2 people all the way up to like the CISO of Charles Schwab, talking to people all in between of this problem and the market and their pains and the competitive landscape and what are people doing right, what are people doing wrong in the industry, and taking our best approach while again, like I just said a little bit ago, I wasn't an expert at SOC 2. Obviously, I'm a really fast learner, an expert engineer, like you become a student of it. But at the same time,
Yeah,
It
I was going
wasn't
to
like
say
I was
with
an engineer.
right. And with the SOC 2 stuff, and so I'm somewhat familiar with, right? You either get, I think in education, it's like the HVAT, right? Which is like a
Yeah.
spreadsheet that you have to fill
Yeah.
out, or you
Yes.
can do SOC 2. So you kind of have two options. And so for anybody who's never gone through that process, a lot of it has less to do with any kind of like software engineering or code, is not a majority of it. A majority of it is like almost integrating with your Jira tickets just to show that you're kind of on top of your processes. And it feels like there's a lot of integrations that you guys do or could do,
Yeah.
right? With that
Yeah,
kind of
that's
thing.
a very correct point. Is that I mean, it is about running a very secure, well-run business.
Sure.
That's the point.
Sure.
The whole point of SOC 2 is to, if you have customer data in the cloud, it's like, how do you prove that you're keeping that data secure? Because 15 years ago there was no cloud, and you had your own servers, and so the ISO 27001 spec is more around that. It's still a very popular international spec for proving your security. SOC 2's kind of become the gold standard especially in the cloud world and the SaaS world. And while you do, like, high level examples like, are your databases being backed up? Are they, is it encrypted at rest? That's infrastructure side. But maybe on the personnel side is a really common one, is like, you fired someone. Did you remove their access to critical systems within an SLA window, like 24 hours? Okay, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but how do you then go a year later to show an auditor that for that whole year you were staying compliant? You
Right.
have to show them evidence of, these people were terminated, and here's the evidence that they were removed from AWS or GitHub or whatever. And that is the burden of SOC 2. And it makes sense why there's a burden there, because the auditor isn't in your company and sitting with you doing it with your HR or IT teams. So you have to keep a trail of all of this. And all of these tools that we use now, like G Suite or now Google Workspace, AWS, GCP, Slack, GitHub, your HRIS systems like Gusto, your MDM systems like Jamf, like all this kind of stuff we've integrated with. And we're able to pull the evidence of the metadata from all of these API services and then track it along the SOC 2 framework that you probably aren't the expert in, that we become the experts in, and partner with actual audit firms and audit, like people that do the audits are our partners and have helped guide the product and help shape the product. This wasn't like me, Daniel, like, this is what I think auditors need, right? It's like we've surrounded ourselves with experts of what is the end goal of what consumers would want, like business owners and CISOs, and then as well as the auditors, and then reverse engineer a product around the SOC 2 framework.
And so if you've never gone through a SOC 2 audit, just from my perspective, like what your customers or future customers, if you're about to encounter one, you should just reach out to Daniel, honestly, because what'll happen is it's not things that you can offload. Like your software engineers are going to be busy for, like, it's the cost to your software development backlog is going to be tremendous.
Yes.
Because you can't send your non-software team in to go get like all the Jira tickets and all the logs within AWS, and like somebody else that's not a developer is probably not going to be able to go in and get those things, right? And so, or draw out diagrams of the infrastructure of your app, right? And just make sure you have a diagram you can quickly pull from, that you know where everybody it is, and you don't have to dig in Dropbox, right?
Yep.
So you're talking about like hundreds of hours of software engineering, not to mention the brain damage of this is the last thing that software engineers want to be dealing with.
100%. Yeah.
This is when everybody's like, we need a security guy. Somebody hire a security guy.
100%. I mean, funny enough, right? We're dog fooding our own product, that's like one of my favorite parts of this business. Like, if we're going to go sell SOC 2 readiness software, we better be SOC 2 compliant. And that's why it actually took us so long to launch. We were in a private beta in late November, but we launched in the middle of January of this year because we were going through our process to get our own SOC 2 report. And honestly, like, it was kind of a pain in the ass. And the reason was because while we were doing it in November, we're much more further along now in the software process. But I think it was a perfect timing to get our own SOC 2 type 1 report. There's a couple types. Type 1 is at a moment in time, and type 2 is in the future, or sorry, type 2 is over a period of time. So it's like right now we're actually scheduled to get our type 2. So you have to actually give the auditor enough time to like review that you're maintaining this compliance. So it was a perfect time, in my opinion, in late November to get our SOC 2 as soon as we launched the product in a beta, because it helped us find the gaps in the product, to help me as the CTO find the pain of other CTOs and security professionals of this process of working with the auditor side by side and getting this evidence. And I was like, oh, okay, we had, I don't know, 50-60% of it automatically through our platform, but the little percent, it was like, oh, we don't have that yet. Okay, I'm writing that down. And, me and the engineering team are going to automate this. And so it was essentially just a big checklist of what to automate next. And now that it's been, a few months since our initial audit, we've checked all those boxes. And so now we're really gearing up towards just deeper integrations into more tools, a bigger breadth of tools as we get on more customers that use, Azure or Heroku, where we kind of first started with AWS and then we went to GCP, and now we're getting into Azure and Heroku.
So that's a good transition into, you guys are actually hiring front end and back end engineers at the moment. Can you kind of take us through what they'd be working on? You can start with whichever one is.
Yeah, sure. The front end stack's all in React. I've actually decided, I've been kind of I've always been a student of like, what are the trends in the industry and whatnot. And I am that like startup person and want to use the bleeding edge. And I'm also an engineer. I still code and I love that, as an engineer, you love like the newest stuff and whatnot. But I'm also that like more reserved CTO where it's like, okay, let's use like hardened software for our production processes. And the last business, it was like, okay, Node was going through a weird, I don't know, adolescent space, I guess, where like they sold and then there was splitting, and it was like even a unknown if Node as a language is going to be around. But eventually those guys took care of it all on their, licensing and legal battle stuff. And it kind of looks like Node is here to stay. Like the community has adopted to it. All of the DevOps tools are in Node and NPM, and like everything shifted away from Ruby, years ago, in gem packages and whatnot for server management and whatever, and development. And so, and I was like, I wasn't quite there yet with the last business, but this business, I was really excited to use Node. So the whole stack is JavaScript, front ends,
awesome.
React, back ends Node. We're using Nest.js. It's an amazing API platform if you guys haven't heard about it. And so on the front end stack, it's all React. So, we would want to hire someone that has experience in React. React hasn't been around for that long. So it's not like most people don't have 10 years of experience in React, because that means you would have probably created React. But
it is fun seeing the job post with 10 years of React though.
Yeah. So it's like, if you had like a few years experience in React itself, but also have experience in just being a front end engineer for so long. A lot of people I know in the industry, and like myself, you have those stories of battling CSS till 3 a.m. And like, those are the people I want to work with, the people that like contributed to W3C and are very well aware of the web and browsers and just like JavaScript and HTML and things like that. So while the front end app is the more, what I would say, simpler part of our stack, because it's a lightweight console that you would log into and manage the process, the idea is the more constrained part, or not constrained, like the more complex part of our system is the back end, where we're making all these integrations. So a lot of maybe experience with working with third-party APIs. I think like all languages are meeting in the middle, but you have these like strict languages like Java and C#, and then like loosey-goosey PHP and JavaScript and whatever. But like, there's these like middle bridges like TypeScript that are like making everything converge in the middle. And it's amazing. Like, as like a back-end strong engineer there, like you love having that structure and types and object-oriented principles and abstraction, inheritance, and all these patterns you can do. And it kind of all comes together in Node and Nest and the way they implemented things. And so it's been really nice. But in our interviews and the people we've brought on, like strong, it's almost like we're interviewing for Java candidates, like which is cool. It's putting a lot of structure to it. But you could imagine if you're doing the same integration on our side, but you need to go connect to end tools that do the same thing but in their own different way, like holy cow, inheritance, abstraction, like factories, like those are all perfect patterns for doing this kind of stuff. So those are the things we really test for in the senior backend position we're hiring.
What is your guys's I know it'll be a little bit different for front end and back end, but I don't need like the specific questions, but like, what does your interview process look like? Like, how many rounds are there, that kind of a thing?
Yeah, I usually do a kickoff myself. I've always kind of done it this way, is I usually just have, like a quick kickoff call to make sure learn a little bit about the candidates, their story. I always like saying, like, in engineering, probably more so programming, you could go be writing like software for Elon Musk's spaceship, or you could be writing compliance automation software with me and the whole world of in between, like, you know, I don't know, chip drivers for vending machines, like, who knows? So like, why API, or as example, why, you know, compliance software, like, why are you interested in this and how did you get here? And so I like to learn their story of their like journey of development and programming. And then, you know, just try to see how passionate they are. To me, it's like, yeah, obviously we're going to assess their skills, but it's their passion for the industry. Like, some people go to, you know, a code camp or something because they didn't like the last job and they want to go make more money, and they know programming makes more money. Okay, but it's just like a job and they don't care. And that's great. My hats are off to those individuals to like making jump into a better life for the families. But I want people on my team that are just like, they want to jump in with both feet. Like, they're not watching reruns at Friends at night. They're like watching like the F8 conference or something. Like, they're students of this industry and they're excited about learning every day. Like, I learn every day something new, whether it's in JavaScript or PHP or the servers, or you know, we've been using Terraform on the back end. And while I have one of my most senior team members on that owning it, like, I get in there and I do the code reviews because I want to learn it. Like, it's exciting, it's cool. So we want those kind of people around. And so I test for kind of that. And then I kind of have like a weed out, you know, a few questions just to make sure they know what they're doing. And then if all that's good, we move on to like more of a, you know, hour-long, more in-depth interview with depends on the front end or back end, the questions and whatnot. And you know, sometimes, well, nowadays with tools like CodePen and virtual, you know, over because of COVID and everything, just, you know, virtual interviews, like, you know, tools like CodePen are amazing to like build these little simple questions and see how they think through little problems. Like, I'm not asking, I hate those type of questions where it's like reverse the string, and it's just like, dude, there's like functions for that, like Lodash has that or something. Like, I want you to like fix a real bug of like, you know, some I don't know, some like state management thing in React, or on the back end, like, I don't, you know, who knows, whatever, some ORM like SQL join issue or something. So those are kind of the things. And then a lot of times, especially on the back end, it's a lot of it's like philosophy type questions. Like, how do you, there's not right, wrong or right answers. It's just like, one of my favorite questions is like, if you were a NASA engineer and you had a model sending a rocket to Mars, like, tell me how you would architect that simulator. Like, you know, and people take it where they like focus on the rocket, or they'll focus on like the physics of getting there, or they'll focus on just like object spaces, like the planets and the satellites and gravity and stuff like that. And so it's really cool to see where people take it and just how their brain works. And so those are like kind of how those interviews go with the second round. And probably the last round would be like a quick 30-minute sync up with my co-founder and CEO, Adam. Just, you know, to culture, you know, make sure also that, you know, you meet the CEO and that we vibe in the culture we're building at this company. And obviously make sure we're, you know, not crazy misaligned on the compensation and stuff. Yeah, and all that fun stuff. So that's kind of the interview process.
Awesome. And currently, these would both the front end and back end position report to you? And how big is the current team that they'd be joining?
Yeah, we're actually, because we're growing so fast, it's kind of crazy that we're this little startup company as of last year, and I think we have north of 20 employees. You know, blended with contractors, I think we're at 25 already. So it's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, a lot in the engineering too. So I've already like tried to think like, hey, as we grow, we're going to be growing fast, like especially to the end of 2021 and into 2022, and who knows what's on the future of you know, most likely we'll raise a Series A. We don't need to right now, but like you know, we'll probably do that. And so it's like, okay, if we get an injection of cash even more, like, I'd better have a plan for that as the CTO. And so I'm trying to actually, I think when you have like 6 engineers, it's good enough to just, you know, be very flat. But as we've like grown into like, I've kind of lost track now, but like, I think there's like 12 or so. I've already
Okay.
like seen the problem. I can't have like 12 or 18 direct reports. I'm going to lose my mind. And so I've already started forming like more of a pod kind of system, like a lot of companies do, where it's
Yep.
like its own self-contained unit with the product manager, owner, tech lead, and then engineers under there. So we're kind of just forming the two pods now. And so in terms of where you would come in, it would just be dependent on which pod you join, but you'd probably report up to that tech lead in the pod, and then those individuals report up to me. But it's still like super flat. I'm involved
Yeah.
like on everything. Like I read
I
every
could
single
ask you
line of
next
code.
week and it could all change.
Sure, sure. But yeah. So yeah, that's how that goes.
Awesome. Is there anything else about Drata that I did not ask about that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I would say, for anyone else that's listening, I'm sure if you guys have worked at like a mid-market or enterprise company, you've gone through this pain. So you should hopefully know what we're trying to solve. And if it's interesting to you to automate some of this stuff, let us know. I always kind of equate it to like taxes. Like everyone hates taxes. Like that's no known, secret. But I think like imagine building TurboTax in the beginning, even though it's this very complex tax laws and process. Like it would have been really fun to be the engineer and product managers over. It probably still is fun over TurboTax, but in the super early days building it, it probably would have been really fun and like building this into this multi-billion-dollar thing that they've done now. And that's what we're after, is taking this unsexy process that no one wants to do and making it fun and making it interesting. So the coolest thing as me as an entrepreneur is I would say number one is employing people. I've always been a very strong employee first type of person. So be able to employ people and expand their lives, and that's all great. The second part is seeing our existing customers and having them from day one see value about starting a compliance program and a security program at their business, where it was always this cost center and this thing they didn't want to do. And now it's a thing that they're embedding into their culture where they do care about security, and it's like not such a burden, and they're changing their culture around it with using Drata at the core of it, and that's really powerful to see.
One of the things I appreciated too, in looking over your guys' website and the positions itself, was the learning stipend for your dev team. And so, more than the stipend itself, it just kind of shows initiative in the sense that keeping your team constantly learning is a high priority, which is both rare and super valued, because most engineers just want to learn, right?
Yeah,
We're just
yeah.
curious, and we just want to like not be bored, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's new technology every day, right? Like, I don't know the exact timelines, but like, how old is Terraform? It's not that old. Like, and that's such a powerful tool. Like, how old is React? Like, I mean, in those, like, roll back 7 years, like React was coming on the scene. Like, yeah, you would have wanted to keep, and now look where it is. And so, keeping up to date with the trends and exploring it, whether we use it or not, but having that expertise to make that decision to use it or not is
Right.
what I encourage. Yeah.
And if they want to apply, where's the best place for them to go? Is it your guys' website?
Yeah, on the website in the header, there's under the company drop down, there's the careers page.
All right. I'll put the link in the show notes for everybody.
Great.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Daniel.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Chasing Squirrels. Again, this episode was brought to you by goldensquirrel.io. Companies apply to you while ensuring their salary and benefits information matches your requirements before they interview you. You can create a free profile today at goldensquirrel.io to get access to members-only data, as well as unlock the opportunity for companies to apply to you. We have an exciting announcement that we will announce on next week's episode of Chasing Squirrels, so stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe.